So hello everyone. My name is Justin Joseph. I'm a researcher with Dr. Krishna's team, and I help out a little bit with the Young and Restless. Um, Before we get started with the presentation, we just want to quickly talk about Dr. Krishna's research team and how we partnered with the amazing Young and Restless. Just to kind of give you background, our research operates out of Emory University and focuses on patient-centered outcomes research. Some topics that we study include young stroke and mild stroke, comparing the effectiveness of rehab following stroke across various settings, the management of caregiver burden following neurological conditions, and the prevention and early detection of secondary complications following stroke. Really, the goal of our research is to design, evaluate, and disseminate rehabilitation research to improve shared decision making. Our aim is to evaluate healthcare delivery systems to implement value-based care. Tonight, without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce Miss Allison Mann. As a married mother of three from Cartersville, Georgia, Miss Allison Mann will share her experiences from both sides of brain injury. As a patient suffering a traumatic brain injury and a stroke as well as a registered occupational therapist. Join us to hear of her journey from starting life over following high school to living a successful, full life. Many struggles, trials, miracles, hard work, positive feedback, and support pushed Allison to never, ever give up. I'm really excited to introduce Miss Allison Mann. Before we start, I'd like to remind everyone just if you can keep your mic muted unless you have any questions during the presentation, and to just prevent noise and feedback. I'll now hand over the mic to Miss Allison Mann.
Well, hello. Hi, I'm very excited to be here today to try to fill you in the last 35 years of my life. And I could go on for hours, but I've got some notes, so hopefully I won't stray too hard anyway, too far from them. But actually one of the assistants to the Brain Injury Foundation director had started an article about me for the other support group that I've been involved in with. And as she wrote, she put, surviving a TBI is difficult enough. Surviving a TBI and a stroke is difficult to imagine. But this is where my story begins and how that it led me to a new purpose in my life. And as Justin said, I graduated from high school in 1986 and in May of 86. And in September, I left and went to Auburn University to start school there. And I was there for about a month. And I was there as a pre-med major, knowing I wanted to do something in the medical field, but I had no idea what. And then in October, everything came to a complete halt because I was home for the weekend in Griffin, Georgia. And my sister and I had gone out to a friend of mine's house. And on the way back home, we were involved in a car accident. It ended up putting me in the hospital for 5 months, to the day plus one day. And it was a very hard, long road for sure. But it was kind of frustrating because my sister, who was 15 at the time, got a concussion. And so she got to go home. But I got 5 months in the hospital. And that was a long time for sure. But I started out when sort of my traumatic brain injury occurred during this accident, as well as the stroke. But the TBI was sustained from where I got a bruise on my right frontal lobe, which then caused left-sided paralysis. And then the stroke was caused by a bleed in my brain. And that ended up keeping me in a coma for 26 days, unfortunately. And of course, I was awake after 26 days, but it was years really before I cleared being out of the coma, all the stages of coma anyway. But I ended up with a ruptured bladder, a lacerated liver, some broken bones, one of which was a rib that punctured one of my lungs. So therefore I had I forgot what it was called. Anyway, it put me on a respirator, and that kind of started me off within a bad situation. Oh, and another broken bone was my ankle, and that never was even addressed because they didn't think I was going to live at all. So that further complicates me walking now to a certain degree. But en route to get to Atlanta Medical Center, where they knew I needed to go, they had to stop and take me to Southern Regional Hospital in Clayton County. And I spent the first 24 hours there to try to get me stabilized. And in the first 12 hours, I had 2 different surgeries and trying to stop the bleeding. And at the same time, there was a prayer visual for me at my home church in Griffin. And a man stood up and said, "Lord, what we need right now is for Allison to stop bleeding." And very shortly after that was the first miracle that I did stop bleeding, thankfully. It was still a long road to go, but we had to stop the bleeding to begin with. And then I was transferred to a medical center to be in the trauma unit there, where I needed the care for sure. And then spent 3 months of the 5 next months in the inpatient rehab unit, which would never happen today. But I guess I was lucky it was 1986 that they weren't, I guess insurance wasn't quite as picky then. So then finally on Friday, March the 13th of 1987, I was discharged from the hospital, which was now my lucky day for Friday the 13th. But I was able to go home to be with my family and friends. And that's another good point I wanted to make, that with any kind of brain injury, that you definitely need to have some kind of support system with relatives, blood relatives, family friends, special friends, pets, just whoever that might be, or significant others, whoever can be close to you to provide that support, because that is very, very important to have the background, to the backbone behind you to keep you so you can push yourself on. But my parents opted to take me home versus an extended rehab facility, because they felt, my mother just felt like that was the best place for me to be. And in hindsight, it truly was. And my mother at this time was a nursing instructor at Gordon College. She's been as an RN and has been forever with her master's degree. And she knew my medical and cognitive needs from this background she had. So, but she was able to put together a home program to mimic what I was doing on inpatient rehab, to continue the progress and the therapy that I was getting there. And in fact, she was able to find a neuropsychologist to head the program up, and have a PT and OT, a speech therapist. And I had family friends that were math and English majors, so they helped with that kind of aspect of the speech therapy. And we did some recreational therapy that some good family friends come over to help with crafts and games and that kind of thing, to help me focus on some of the deficits that I was trying to address with that. More fun kind of stuff. But this program was more intense than what I had when I was in the hospital on the inpatient rehab unit, because it wasn't just twice a day getting the therapy. It was continuous from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 or 9, sometimes at night. Most days probably till like 5 or 6, but it would go late some nights. so when it finally got to a point that I was cognitively and physically ready to just move on with my life, I was able to go down to Gordon College with my mom to take an English class, just to kind of get my feet wet in December of '87. It's when I started this class. And that was a good way to just get me used to being back in a school setting, because as of spring quarter, March of '88, I did go back to Auburn University, where I was initially been enrolled. And I was there I started out as a pre-OT major instead of pre-med. But Auburn didn't have an OT program. And I wanted to stay in Alabama, obviously, for whatever reason. And I ended up going to the University of Alabama at Birmingham for OT school, not at Tuscaloosa, for sure. But I was, another miracle of that is that I was told when I was at the hospital by a neuropsychologist there that evaluated me that I would probably never go back to school. But this just shows that doctors don't know everything, and they can't predict everything either. So I guess I could showed them wrong anyway. But in January of 1993, I did start the OT program at UAB, and it was not an easy feat by any means. The classes were not super easy. It was actually pretty difficult, but with a lot of adaptations and compensations, I was able to, and hard work, I was able to pull through and graduate cum laude with making pretty good grades there. So, but then and that was another miracle that God had pretty much, I felt like God had prepared me all my life for what I was going to have to go through and what I had to do to get through with school, with the brain injury too. And I was always been driven. I've been very persistent and focused on whatever the needs were at the hand anyway. So that was another blessing for sure. Now, but I worked for 28 years as an occupational therapist. I worked in outpatient rehab and did some acute care, just seeing patients in the hospital there too. I've worked in nursing facilities, nursing homes, and with home health. And in home health, I went to patients' houses and to assisted living facilities and personal care homes. So I've kind of been in a lot of different areas, and so lots of different patients with a lot of different diagnoses through all that.
So I have a question. So
Yes.
when you were in school,
Mhm.
were you recovering at that point when you were in school?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Wow. So you were recovering from a stroke in school at the time and still cum laude?
Yes.
Wow. That's impressive. That's really impressive.
Well, I mean, was the constant progression. I feel like I'm still recovering anyway. I mean, when I was in school, I was recovering enough to be able to get back to school to function at that level. But yeah, it's an ongoing thing. I mean, I feel like today I'm still trying to recover some things anyway. And I've recovered a lot more since I was in school. I can tell you that too. But then when I was working in home health and in the nursing homes, I just somehow had a connection with the older adults. And I'm not sure what the connection was, but it just clicked. And so I felt like that was my niche of where I needed to be with people. And whenever being an OT, I always, at the evaluation, the first visit I would have with the patients, would always tell them a little bit about my history, just so they would know that I understand. I've been there, been in their shoes, and maybe I didn't know their exact circumstances were not exactly the same, but I still understood from the point that I at one time couldn't do for myself. And that made a difference with a lot of people and how they responded to what I was trying to show them, and to give them the encouragement to just keep trying anyway. But then, and especially with the stroke patients, it was like a light bulb went off, like somebody that truly does understand what's going on. I'm sure y'all all felt the same way when you've talked with other doctors or therapists, and everybody says, when they say, I understand how you feel, and you want to say, nope, sorry, you really don't. But that was they're trying to understand anyway. Now, I said through all the years I was an OT, I did have a lot of different diagnoses I treated, from orthopedics to strokes and a few TBIs and other brain injuries, but there's a large gamut of what I was, different types of people that I worked with anyway. And then another thing is I always try to be a little pushy with things about what people needed to do and how they needed to try to push themselves, because I know that's where I came from. And my family was my biggest support system. My mom, my dad, my sister, because they were always behind me trying to say, come on, you can do this. Don't give up. Come on. Because there were times I got frustrated with things at times, like anybody else has. And I'm sure all of you have. But it was just the encouragement to be able to say, come on, let's keep pushing. You're going to be able to do this. And it was never, if you ever do this again, but when you can do this again. And I always had short-term goals of things I wanted to do that I had to be able to do before I could do the long-term goals, like to be able to walk with no assistance. Well, first of all, I had to get where I could walk with just crutches by myself. I could walk with a cane by myself. So, I mean, there were just certain times of certain points that you have to figure out what is your short-term goal that you got to get to the long range one. And that's the OT coming out in me anyway, but that's part of it.
So I got one more question. So specifically when you set goals, because I've been in many OT offices or OT, that I had that type of therapist helping me.
Right.
And they would ask me, what are your goals? And I had a hard time articulating, I want to get better. But they were teaching me to break it down into smaller goals.
Right. You have like a
that
big
was
goal. You want to get better, but what specifically do you want to do better? You want to be able to bathe yourself. You want to be able to dress yourself. You want to be able to do whatever, but then you got to break it down. You start with, I want to be able to put on my shoes. I want to be able to get my shirt on by myself. You have to break it down to the smaller portions of what it is you have to be able to do that long range goal in the end. So, and that it is hard to figure out. That's kind of hard sometimes as a therapist to figure out exactly what do we want to do to work on, what do we need to work on first to get somebody to where they're wanting to get to, or what's a feasible thing that we can help this person to get back to being able to do. Because I had patients that had goals that were probably way too big and were not attainable. There's no way they were ever going to be able to do what they wanted to be able to do, but you have to figure out how to get them to what point that they get things that they can do for themselves and do independently with safety for whatever that they're able to do. So that's kind of the main goal, is getting to where you are functioning at your top level, whatever that top level is. So the bottom line is that you want to be able to do whatever you can do at whatever level that you can do it. So that depends on what your injury level is or what your deficits are. to stay within what is feasible for you, kind of things, to not aggravate your frustration more. Because if you set your goals too high, then that just kind of knocks you down anyway. But never give up about what you can do. You just never know for sure. But I still do have deficits that really frustrate me at times. In fact, this week I was very frustrated with myself because of something I did that I couldn't make happen like I wanted to do. And that's going to happen from time to time anyway. But one of the things that frustrates me the most is my left arm and my left leg are still weak from the initial paralysis I had. And then I have decreased balance, which is part of the brain injury and stroke, for who knows which one is which. But and then I have a altered gait where I'm walking is very frustrating because it's not like it shouldn't be normal anyway, but it's not. And I drag my left foot some, which therefore ends up causing me to trip and occasionally fall, which is not a good thing because I'm probably pre-osteoporotic. My mother has osteoporosis, and I think my grandmother did too. So I probably am going to have it. Unfortunately, that's not a good thing.
What is pre-osteo?
Osteoporosis is where your bones are extra brittle, and they can spontaneously break if you're very, very pronounced osteoporosis. And hopefully I won't get to that point, but that just means if I fall, I could be my bones are that much more fragile. So I'd be greater risk of breaking bones if I fall. So it's all the more reason to be as much careful as I can and to work on my balance to try to improve the gait so that I don't fall. And that's hard to do sometimes too. But I do try my best to not do it. But because I also can't run because I can't get my left leg to move fast enough to run and get away from something if I have to. And then as you hear, my voice is very raspy and soft. And so therefore I cannot yell. Although my kids have taken that as taken advantage of that. Because when they were little, when they wouldn't do things, it's like, didn't you hear me? Well, no, we didn't hear you. Right. So and sometimes I do have trouble finding the right word to use, that word finding issue. And I know people say, oh, I do that all the time, but I don't know. I think it feels like to me that it happens more than it probably should, but you just have to learn to compensate. And I do I think I come up with all kind of extra words that maybe don't mean the real word that I'm trying to look for, but I somehow get the point across anyway. And then
like we were talking about aphasia earlier. Were you ever diagnosed with aphasia at any level of it or any degree of aphasia? Or
I don't know that I ever was diagnosed with that. I was slow for sure. And I had problems with word retrieval. So I guess in a sense, maybe I did have some of the aphasia from that aspect, but it just gradually over time has resolved to a great degree with myself. And I know that's not always the case, but you just have to learn strategies and compensations of how to get around some of those things too. And that comes with practice and just living life and doing the best that you can. But speech therapy is a very good asset for the aphasia for sure. I know. And with OT, it's kind of a combination of physical therapy, speech therapy, and occupational therapy too. because I'm working with patients physically with their body and sometimes with their legs too. Mostly physical therapies for the legs, the like lower half of the body. And it may be that I'm trying to work on somebody being able to walk and get to the bathroom, which is part of OT. But then there's a cognitive function that they're not quite understanding what I'm talking about. Then I have to address the cognitive issues about what the name of the words are, with the toilet, the shower, and knowing how labeling those things. So therefore it pulls in some of the speech therapy too. So it's all inclusive for sure. But one other compensation that I use a lot is lists, because another issue I have is with memory. And I have lists to keep up with my list a lot of times. And I panic when I can't find my list because I can't remember the things I'm trying to remember anyway. And that's why I write things down all the time. So that's my compensation for that. But it's and then some things, I know y'all all know this. It seems like everything I do is so slow. I just can't speed things up and make things happen faster. But I know too, now that I have to go slow to make things safer for me, because if I try to do something too fast, I always end up making a mess, and then I just stop cleaning that up. So it ends up taking twice as long. And that's frustrating to me too. But one thing I have finally come to an acceptance, or that I've concluded that I have to accept things because of my brain injury, that's just to the way it is for some things. And I do have to adjust and compensate for a lot of things, but you know what? That's okay. Because the bottom line is I can get the job done, whatever it is. Like for instance, now I do fine bathing and dressing and all that, but it still takes me longer, I think sometimes, because I do have to sit down to make sure I'm not going to lose my balance and fall while I'm getting dressed. And I have to sit down and put my shoes on just for safety. And then my kids are always hurry up and waiting. Hurry up and get ready to walk out the door. I'm like, sorry, just chill. It'll be all right. You have to just wait, because it is okay. It's just the way it is. You know?
So you had to deal with that even years of being a stroke patient.
Right.
You were doing 20 or 30 years of working in the but you still had to accommodate for those things
Right.
at that time. So it didn't come easy to you, or it didn't come less frustrating to you. It still stayed the same over the time.
It's become less frustrating and things have improved, but there's still an element of that things are still slow, and that I know I've got to just be careful. But the fact that I've accepted it. And then for a long time, I thought I accepted my injuries, but that really, I had a neuropsychologist that I'd seen, or a psychologist, and that I talked with, and they suggested that I write a goodbye letter to the old Allison.
Mm-hmm.
And this was like maybe 3 or 4 years after the accident, maybe more. But I did do that. It took me about 2 or 3 hours, but I cried my eyes out the whole time I wrote it. But that was one of the best things for me, because I kept comparing myself to what I was before. And I said, well, why can't I do this? I could do this before. But it was a hard acceptance to do. And I thought I accepted everything, but I didn't really, it really helped me to write that goodbye letter, to be able to say, that's not me anymore. This is the new me, and that kind of thing. However, I still, just until probably a year ago, hadn't truly completely accepted everything to say, it really is okay. And that I'm just slow, and I've worked on things to get things better, but some things are just always going to be this way. But don't accept everything just right away. Like I said, it's been 35 years for me. And I still get frustrated. There's still those moments too. But it's kind of the way it just goes, unfortunately.
Just an illustration break. That has been the hardest part, dealing with stroke, since I had a stroke. And I haven't had that letter writing experience like you had. Maybe I need to do one.
That might be a good thing to do, really.
I probably need to, I know this is me. I probably need to throw away my old self, how I used to be, because I do a lot of comparing.
Yeah.
Oh, I never used to do this. I never used to do that. I never used to do this. I never used to do that. And, that can send you in a whirlwind,
Right.
thinking about how you used to be.
Right.
And not focus on how you are.
Right. And that really, it made a major difference for me when I first did that. I probably need to do it again, but it just really opened my eyes to about how much I was comparing myself to the old Allison. And so I'm sure everybody's kind of felt some of the same situations, and that maybe can help with some of that too. But anyway, I was gonna say, but now, even with the deficits, I am still very functional. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and I've birthed and raised 3 miraculous kids, because I was actually told initially that I could carry a child. I had broken my pelvis, but I could carry a child, but getting pregnant I may need help with that for fertilization because of some injuries in my brain. But thankfully, my husband and God and myself pulled it off 3 times with no medical intervention. So I feel like these babies were meant to be, for sure. And they've been wonderful children. I asked my son, oldest, they have a 23-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 17-year-old. So I asked my son if he could do this survey about children of people with brain injuries, but the survey was focused more on someone who the child had, or the person had the brain injury after having children. And all 3 of my children I had after my injury. And my son said, "Mom, I never knew any different. You were all I knew," so I just did the best I could anyway with him. But doing this still with some of the injuries that I have, but I'm still, like, I can drive and I'm a homemaker. And like I said, I did retire back in March, but that's because I fell at one of my patients' houses before I even got to the house twice. And that was because of my balance. But 2, I was trying to walk on sweet gum tree balls, which are like walking on balls all over under your feet. And that's kind of difficult anyway. But I just felt like, this is like the red flag. God's telling me you need to go ahead and retire and focus on you. So I have been able to do more exercise and trying to help keep myself as strong as possible, so I can be as safe as possible too. So that's where I am now, and trying to focus on me. And while I only have one child, well, I have two children at home, but one's senior in high school, and the other is in college, but she's opted to live at home. Like she's in the dorm room upstairs in our house, but that's good. So now I've got more time to focus on me, for sure. I mean, I really believe, I know for my Christian beliefs, that God knew I was going to use my free will to pull out in front of this car that was coming that I don't remember seeing. And he used the injuries and the time span that I've spent in the hospital and my experiences with trauma, suffering, all the miracles and the recovery process I've been through to be able to show me what occupational therapy is, as well as what he can do for people. And here I am, and that there is life after brain injury. So you can always keep on going. Now, one of the things that was a big step for me is that in occupational therapy, I have to get continuing education credits every 2 years to keep my license up. And I actually went to a continuing education class on braces and mobility. And there was a man presenting this knee brace and an AFO combination that would help to improve ambulation, specifically for a person with stroke or having a TBI. And I thought, I've got both. So I went and spoke with this gentleman, and he said, well, let's go try this on you. And I was able to try this brace on, and I was able to walk with much improvement with the brace. And the goal was to wear the brace and practice for a long time to get where I didn't have to wear the brace and I could walk much better. Now, Justin, do you have those videos?
I do. Can we show them?
Yes.
Lovely.
We'll first show the picture that I sent first. Yeah, here. In the far left, in the red picture, December 3rd, that was the first day I moved to the inpatient rehab unit. And you can see where my left legs pulled up like that. I had to have it in that position. I had a bone calcium deposit that developed in my hip that forced my leg into that external rotation. And then the next picture is me in the bed. You can see where my legs out to the side there too. But then in February, I was able to be up walking on a walker. This was at my house. And that's a picture of me in the background. I was 16 at that time. And then the picture with me March 13th, I was able to walk out of the hospital. It was just to take a couple of steps to get through the doors on the crutches, but so it wasn't major walking, but I just was able to go on crutches out the door. And then 31 years later, there's me walking without the brace on. And that was just the end of October after I got the braces in earlier that month in October 14th. So,
and this is after you got your degree. This is
right.
After you got cum laude. This is after the doctor told you that you wouldn't be walking like that, or you won't be able to finish school or whatever.
Right.
Right. My goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. But then the videos, at this conference, they ended up giving me the knee brace and the AFO combination. I think I was kind of going to be the guinea pig and be the stipulation was I had to send them videos of me walking just like every couple of weeks anyway, to see the progress and what was going on for their documentation purposes. And this picture is from one of the videos. And I just was making this little collage of just a summary of my progress anyway. Okay, this is how I used to walk. See that leg slapping out there and turned out to the side? It's a very functional stroke walk, post-stroke walk, but it was not normal at all. And I was wearing out my shoes. I had to keep go buying new pairs of shoes because I got holes in them. And then that show those videos, Justin, because that shows more about what happened when I got the brace on.
There we go. Ready when you are.
And with the brace on, I could walk pretty normally. And then the other one shows me walking. And this is October 31st. So it's only like 3 weeks after getting the brace. And then there's me walking without the brace. Still not good, but it's much better than it was with that initial walk.
All right.
So was there any shock stimulation with the brace? You know, sometimes
Well, in the knee brace, it has bladders on the sides of my knee, both sides of my knee, that I would pump up. And that would send messages up to my brain to kind of help me to reprocess and rewire those circuits so that I was walking the way I was walking normally wearing the brace was helping my brain to recognize how to tell my leg that's how I was supposed to walk. And that's how the brace worked. And the AFO had or the foot brace part was a toe off AFO, so that it made my heel come up every time I took a step. So it felt like normal walking. I wasn't hesitant with trying to pick that leg up at all. It kind of picked it up for me. And it was process of, there's no telling how many miles I've walked, because I go to the gym and walk on the treadmill and just about every day. And that was more so just to try to get the practice in to help to retrain my brain to learn how to do those things. Because anytime, even with a stroke or whatever brain injury, when there's physical deficits, your brain has so many unused brain cells that you can retrain cells to do what you need them to do after you've had a stroke. When cells have been killed, there's lots of cells to be retrained to help to redo or to do the motions and the functions that those killed brain cells were doing. So that was the process with the bladders in the knee joint. But I think that was all something that was new technology that, of course, was not around in '86 when they were trying to help me to get back to walking anyway. So it's been a long process for 35 years to get things going, but it's helped with a lot of things. So, but now I don't have a perfect walk, but it's pretty dang good compared to what it was anyway. So my shoes are lasting a lot longer anyway, so that's good. But my motto is never, never, ever give up, because there's always options. It may not be that you are improving something like I did with the walking, but you can improve something in whatever you're doing. You can learn a new compensation. You can learn. There's too many options of learning that are out there too. So just never say never about things. Although I know I will never be able to run, because that's not an option. There's no way to to get my leg back moving spontaneously, like it would need to be running. But I know we've all been told improvements only happen in the first 6 months, but I'm proof that's not the case. It just depends on well, your a lot of your thought process makes a big difference too.